The food in Korea is very different. Koreans love meat. It could be meats with all these different sauces. And the Koreans also love kimchi. And, kimchi is a very important part. Where Japanese food tends to be a little bit lighter and even a little bit more artistic. And that's where the Japanese have the things like the sushi comes in. And they have things like teriyaki. Hi, this is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast. Today, I want to talk a little bit about Korea and Japan. And in fact, I want to be able to compare, are Korea and Japan similar, or are they a little bit different? Two countries which are now considered economic powerhouses. But yet they are countries that have some similarities and actually have some differences. Let me talk first about some of the similarities I see. And so I first like to make a comment and just say, my thoughts are completely from an outsider. I am not Korean. I am not Japanese. I have been to both places, but these are just my own views and observations as an outsider. Korea and Japan both have competitive education and work systems. And this is pretty much true throughout a lot of Asia, where, the education and the work can be extremely competitive, especially in Korea and Japan. But Japan is actually quite notorious for this, in that maybe someone in Japan who's working may not want to go home earlier than their boss. They want to show that they're always working really hard. They might spend many, many hours at work. And also, too, education is very important. It's very important for the children to get good grades in school, for them to do very well, to get into good universities. So they're actually very highly competitive the same way. They're both wealthy nations. Japan is a highly developed country full of high-rise buildings and luxury cars. Now, when I say rich, it doesn't mean that the people have a lot of money or that the people are necessarily very wealthy, because obviously, Japan is actually a very expensive place to live. Cities like Tokyo are notoriously expensive. But they are, both very, very, rich countries, economically have done well. Japan has some famous brands like Sony, Toyota, Honda, and many of others that all come from Japan. And South Korea has been touted as an economic miracle. Of course, it has brands like Samsung, Kia, and LG Electronics, just to name a few. They are both two countries that have economically done well. They both have some influences from China. Korea, of course, is connected to China. So there you would expect some influence to come there. Everything from the religion to Buddhism, has to the philosophy of Confucianism, to the food, to the language. And of course, Japan also too has influences which have come from China. So both of them have been influenced by China. But this is not uncommon for, a country like Korea or Japan, because a lot of the countries within Asia, even Southeast Asia, many of them have had some really deep Chinese influences. China, for a long time, has dominated and influenced this region of the world. Both are considered East Asian countries. And the list of East Asian countries today include China, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea, South Korea, and Taiwan. Those are the countries which are officially labeled as East Asian countries. Both Korea and Japan, they have respect for their families, their ancestors, and for elders. And this is something which is ingrained in the culture, that they have a deep root and belief in showing respect for their families. Many times a parent may not want to, a parent may, kind of tell a child something what to do, or the child may not want to go against the parent. There can be this deep respect for their ancestors, for their family name, and a child may try to do things to please their parents. Both are dominantly patriarchal societies. Both Korea and Japan are considered dominant patriarchal societies, meaning that the men run the show. Yes, this has been changing over the years. Certainly there's been more women that have been more powerful. Women haven't been in positions of power. We've been able to see the shift in this focus, but that does not necessarily mean that this has changed in the home and in the home life. And, that kind of becomes a reality in many parts of Asia, where the woman could be very powerful at work. She could even have a very high position. And maybe at home, it's more traditional for the family values and the husband is more in charge. But there are actually some differences between them too. Korean and Japanese, they speak totally different languages. A Japanese speaker cannot understand a Korean speaker. A Korean speaker would not be able to understand Japanese. They'd be very different. It would be the same thing with Chinese. In fact, many times if a Korean or Japanese is going to communicate, they may do so in English. Not only is the spoken language different, but the writing systems are absolutely completely different too. So they cannot read each other's writing. So, that of course means that, everything from the spoken to the written language between both countries are different, even though at one point maybe they had quite a few more similarities. Korea and Japan have had different impacts on China. As I mentioned before, one of the similarities was that they both have been impacted by China. Because, as I've also mentioned and want to stress again, that every single country here in Asia has had some impact from China. But actually, Korea has probably been more influenced by China than Japan. A few reasons for this. One is the Korean peninsula is attached to China. So they are most closer to China. So you would expect that there would be more impact from China there. Japan also was closed for a long time. Japan was closed from 1639 to 1853. In fact, it didn't open up until it was forced to open up in 1853. So because of this, Japan was able to develop a lot of its arts and cultures and other things very much away from China. And you'll see during this period of time, you'll see this development of things which were very, very Japanese. That's where you kind of get some of the shoguns, the woodblock prints, some of the paintings, the other things which were really Japanese with Japanese characteristics that was happening within Japan. So Japan really seems to be a country that was able to develop more on their own because they had these couple hundred years or so where they were literally just cut off from the rest of the world. The food in Korea is very different. Koreans love meat. And actually, if you've ever been to Korean barbecue, you would know that. You would know that they love the meats, and there could be meats with all these different sauces. And, actually, Korean food can actually be very, very good. And the Koreans also love kimchi. And, kimchi is a very important part. Where Japanese food tends to be a little bit lighter and even a little bit more artistic. And that's where the Japanese have the things like the sushi comes in and they have things like teriyaki and they have, the fish. And so Japanese food is very different and can be a little bit more, not a little bit more, quite a bit more artistically displayed. So, the two foods can actually be very different. The political structures in both Korea and Japan are very different. Korea was formerly a single country, but now, after, the Korean War, which happened from 1950 to 1953, Korea is divided into two countries, North Korea and South Korea. And the two Koreans are divided politically. They are completely different countries, both culturally and socially. North Korea has a communist dictatorship, and the Korea government's stringent policies in place on what citizens can and can't do and who can or cannot visit their country and what can be done within their own country. On the other hand, South Korea is a presidential representative democratic republic where the citizens have the freedoms in place. And Korea has a multi-party system where the president's head of the state, and South Korea welcomes visitors from every single country. Japan's politics is more like a constitutional monarchy, and Japan has an emperor who's the head of the state, but then they also have a parliamentary. So even though Japan democratically elects a prime minister who's head of the government, they also do have this figurehead that is the emperor. Religion can also be a little bit different than Korea and Japan. Many South Koreans have no religion, but except Christianity's caught on quite a bit within South Korea itself, and Buddhism are also major religions. Japan's religions tend to be more Shinto and Buddhism. So even, the religions are different between Japan and Korea. Korea, of course, has recently come out to be the K-pop and K-drama capital of the world. And of course, we can't talk about Korea without talking about, the BTS, the Korean boy band group, which recently just broke up, but we have the boy band group there. You have the girl group, the Blackpink. You have lots of, K-drama going on that's been exported and and very popular in things like Netflix, things like Crash Landing on You, Mr. Sunshine, and many other movies have become very popular worldwide. So Korea's had this huge export of culture that Japan has really not had in the same way as Korea has had. This is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for our crew, especially Rico, helps to put this together. Please, leave us a comment and let us know how we're doing, and we'd love to hear from you and have you be part of our community. Thank you so much for listening.